Welcome to today's webinar, The Federal Role in Understanding Changing Climate, Weather, Oceans, and Coasts. This is the second installment in a new Environmental Law Institute series entitled Agency ABCs, which will examine various federal agencies, their structures, and the services they provide. Today's webinar continues the series by focusing on NOAA, the United States National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. My name is Madison Calhoun. I'm the Senior Manager of Educational Programs here at ELI. If you're not familiar with the Environmental Law Institute, we are an internationally recognized nonpartisan research, publishing and education center working to strengthen environmental protection by improving law and governance worldwide. Thank you for joining today's program. We would like to also thank our wonderful expert speakers for taking time out of their very busy schedules to prepare a fantastic program for you all today. I just have a couple of logistical notes and then I'll hand things over to our moderator. Today's event is being recorded. The recording will be posted to the event webpage and ELI's YouTube page within a few business days of the program, so be on the lookout for that if you're not able to stay for the entire webinar today. We will be saving time for audience questions at the end of the program, so please feel free to put your questions in Zoom's Q&A box as soon as you think of them. There's no need to wait until the end of the webinar to do so. While the chat will be open for you to post observations throughout the program, please put any questions that you wish for our speakers to address in the Q&A box, not in the chat. And with that, I will introduce today's moderator, Dr. John Doherty. John is a science and policy analyst here at ELI, whose work focuses on how science informs environmental governance, particularly in the context of climate issues. John holds a PhD in Earth Sciences from the University of Hong Kong, an MS in Environmental Science from American University, and a BA in Political Science from American University. In addition to his role at ELI, he is an affiliate researcher at Georgetown University's Earth Commons Institute. Over to you, John. Thank you all so much.
Great. Thanks so much, Madison, and good morning and good afternoon to the folks online. I'm so delighted to welcome everyone to the second installment of our Agency ABC series. As folks online know, there are hundreds of agencies and commissions across the federal government that are responsible for administering and enforcing federal laws, playing a critical role in our system of cooperative federalism. The administrative state, the set of federal administrative and independent agencies, has grown and developed over the greater part of the last 2 centuries as our economy has also grown and society has become more complex. The mission of these agencies is established by Congress and the policies they implement by the administration, and as a result, they can change significantly over time. These agencies function within an established system for decision-making under the Administrative Procedures Act that includes requirements for the consideration of relevant information, transparency, and consultation. A key feature of this system has been its commitment to relying on scientific evidence and technological innovation, and its investment in advancing them in the interest of meeting society's needs. Arguably, the challenges facing our society today are greater than they've ever been, and there are many possible approaches for addressing those challenges and thus many possible policy solutions, and ELI works to identify and advance the effective approaches to priority challenges. It's hard to imagine, though, that without a continued commitment to policymaking informed by evidence and expertise through an accountable and mutually agreed upon process, that we will meet the challenges we're faced with today. Good governance allows for changes in objectives and in approach through accountable processes that respect the rule of law. And specifically, we're here today to talk about NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, with 3 people who really know this sub-agency of the Department of Commerce from the inside and out. When I was thinking about this webinar and what we wanted to cover with it, I struggled a little simply because NOAA has historically done so much. NOAA and NOAA-funded scientists have done groundbreaking work to understand the basics of the climate system and human-caused climate change, advanced our knowledge of and ability to predict extreme weather events, and they work to conserve and manage marine ecosystems, including the socioeconomically important resources that they provide. So NOAA, as we'll hear today, has a wide mission, and as such requires an equally wide range of expertise and people to enact that mission. And I'm so thrilled to be joined today by 3 top experts who are going to be sharing their work and how NOAA fits into it. Each of these speakers will have about 15 minutes to present, and then we're going to do a group Q&A session for the remainder of the program. So first up, we'll be hearing from Renee Stone, who will be telling us more about NOAA and its mission. Renee has 3 decades of experience in the federal government, nonprofit organizations, and private law practice. She has held senior legal, management, and policy positions at the U.S. Department of the Interior, including the National Park Service, US Department of Energy, and yes, also NOAA, most recently under the Biden administration. And she noted that NOAA was, quote, by far the most fun job she ever had. Secondly, Dr. Marshall Shepard will cover the role of NOAA science in extreme weather prediction and preparedness. Dr. Shepard is the Georgia Athletic Association Distinguished Professor of Geography and Atmospheric Sciences at the University of Georgia and director of its Atmospheric Sciences program. In 2022, he was selected SEC Professor of the Year, and in 2021, Dr. Shepard was elected to the National Academy of Sciences, National Academy of Engineering, and the American Academy of the Arts and Sciences. Dr. Shepard is also the host of the Weather Channel's podcast, Weather Geeks, and a senior contributor to Forbes. He's an internationally recognized weather and climate scholar who routinely advises Congress, the White House, and other stakeholders. Among his numerous awards, and I'm sure the one he's most proud of, is that Dr. Shepard was the recipient of ELI's own 2023 Environmental Achievement Award. Finally, Bernadette Woods-Plackey will close out the presentations with a little more on climate and climate change issues. Bernadette is Climate Central's Vice President for Engagement, Chief Meteorologist, and directs the Climate Matters program, where she helps the public understand the importance of climate change science, impacts, and solutions. In her role, she develops partnerships with media organizations, nonprofits, and academic institutions, leads a team that creates reporting resources for media professionals, and serves as an expert on the links between climate change and weather. She previously worked for more than a decade as a TV meteorologist, where she won an Emmy for Best Weathercaster. And her other awards include being named an AMS Fellow and Penn State Earth and Mineral Science Fellow. She's been elected to the AMS Council, National Academy Board of Atmospheric Science and Climate, chairs the Penn State Meteorology and Atmospheric Science Advisory Committee, is on the Weather Channel's Pattern Board, and is a science advisor for Sea Change Conversations. So we clearly have an all-star cast here. And with that, I'm going to pass things over for Renee to get us started.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay, John? Thanks very much to ELI for inviting me to join you all here today. I'm excited to be in such great company with all of you and with my very fabulous fellow presenters. As John said, I worked at NOAA. I was there for about 6.5 years. I was chief of staff during the Obama administration, and I led the infrastructure team during most of the Biden administration. It's a fascinating combination of important things that most people don't know very much about. I'm delighted to be here to share some insights about the importance of the agency and current threats to it. I'm going to give you a quick overview of NOAA and tell you a little bit about us. I'll also highlight some of the attacks on the agency by the current administration. Please forgive me for oversimplification in the interest of time. NOAA is a big, complicated place. And please forgive any sharpness in my tone or any pointed political remarks. They reflect my personal views and not those of ELI. You see here's my first slide. NOAA was established in 1970 by a reorganization order submitted by President Nixon and approved by Congress. This was the same government reorganization effort that created EPA. The reorganization brought together new government functions and some very old ones. The Coastal Survey, which is still part of NOAA, was created in 1807 by Thomas Jefferson. The Weather Bureau, still part of NOAA, was officially established in 1870, even though organized national efforts around weather and data collection and prediction had been going on for decades. Ulysses S. Grant, who established the first National Marine Fisheries Service. In the 60s, JFK called on Congress to expand and improve the government's ocean sciences. Lyndon Johnson, with Congress, then created the commission that designed NOAA. And Richard Nixon submitted the reorganization plan to Congress for its approval. I belabor the history because efforts today to dismember NOAA and lots of other critical government agencies are ignoring it. And also because I think many of the people in the audience may be legal history nerds. Many of the things, this is the real point of it though, many of the things that NOAA does for the country have always been important and have always been nonpartisan, and they always will be. NOAA, like the rest of the federal government, wasn't thrown together overnight and shouldn't be dismantled lightly either. Next slide, please. There was something special and smart that went into and the atmosphere was critical because they are so physically interdependent and interactive. There was a recognition by our political leaders that if we want to be safe from the forces of nature and we want to profit from natural resources, we need to understand them. If you want to catch more fish, as just one example, we need to know more about them. Next slide, please. This is NOAA's mission statement. NOAA monitors, predicts, and describes what happens around the planet. This is often in the form of forecasts and warnings, which protect lives and property and even our national security. NOAA really is an emergency management agency, a science-based services agency. As my previous boss used to say, an environmental intelligence agency. And in all of its areas, fisheries, weather, oceans, coast, climate, everything, services. And of course, it doesn't charge fees for most of these public services. Next slide, please. NOAA's current structure consists of 6 deeply integrated line offices or services. I'm, of course, oversimplifying. So among other things, I'm not going to describe all of the mission support infrastructure associated with this. But there's financial, legal, laboratories, facilities, IT, HR, all of those sorts of things that you can't run an agency without. Of these 6 substantive agencies, the National Weather Service, the National Ocean Service, and the National Marine Fisheries Service are the most public-facing ones and the ones that you're more likely to have heard of. The Marine and Aviation Operations Office, the Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research, and the National Environmental Satellite Data and Information Service, or NESDIS, are less well known to the general public, but they are interdependent with the other 3. They provide backbone services, including data, research, analysis, and operational support for the more interested in learning more, the last slide in my presentation has links to other information about various programs of NOAA, including sort of some of the really fun parts like the hurricane satellite images and things. Next slide, please. A bit more information about each of the line offices. There's one slide on each one. Madison, if you could just sort of slowly page through the next 6 slides, read all of these to you in these slides later if you're interested. Each line office, I will just say, in my experience, is a treat. It's full of niches of expertise and great purpose and really great people. You can stop on the important things NOAA does slide. There you go. Here's my effort to summarize the things that NOAA does. If you've ever looked at a weather forecast, eaten seafood, been on a boat in the ocean or in the Great Lakes, consumed products that arrive in this country by ship, been on a plane, traveled, consumed agricultural products, been to the beach, been to an aquarium, purchased insurance, just to name a few, then you have benefited from services, the science and services provided by NOAA. If you're a business that can be impacted by weather, real estate, insurance, agriculture, shipping, construction, aviation, healthcare, tourism, pretty much anything, you have benefited from NOAA's science and services. In other words, everybody needs the sciences and services provided by this agency. Next slide, please. NOAA usually receives about $6 billion a year in appropriation. Well, and it's hard not to love it. And if you know it and love it, say it should be 2 or 3 times large. I like to say it's a $15 or $20 billion agency inside a $6 billion box. The proposed budget, the last column, the proposed budget for the next fiscal year, which begins in October, that was submitted by this administration and was passed by the House of Representatives. Its prospects in the Senate are not yet clear, but everybody's nervous about it. For NOAA, the administration proposes a 27% cut, taking the budget to about $4.7 billion, the lowest in recent history. And we all think it's just the beginning of the cuts that are planned. This should alarm us all. especially if you actually understand the impacts the country is likely, now increasingly likely. Rising seas, coastal erosion, more extreme storms, our infrastructure and our politics for those impacts now, because we know they're coming. On the people side of this, NOAA has historically employed just over 12,000. They've lost about 2,000 feds and thousands of contractors. Employees were fired, then rehired, then fired again, then just under took early retirement in the face of threatened layoffs. On the day that this last group of people was pushed out the door, the senior career official at NOAA, 27,000 years of expertise was leaving the agency. NOAA has been given an additional rift because of litigation, but it's still hanging over their heads. And hundreds of employees, especially more Schedule F'd. Along with the impacts of the hiring freeze, all of these cuts mean that NOAA is struggling to meet even its most basic public safety mission. Next slide, please. This is what you lose with cuts at that scale. The proposed research office, all climate, weather, and ocean laboratories and cooperative institutions. The Climate Program Office, which includes heat health, wildfire, drought, and flood tools for communities. The staff that manages climate.gov, funding for all sea grant programs across the country. They would cut more than half of the National Ocean Service, essentially eliminating coastal zone management, coastal resilience funding, and technical assistance for communities, numerous ocean observing systems, most of their science programs, and numerous facilities. For fisheries, they would cut the Office of Protected Resources, think marine mammals, corals, sea turtles, and all habitat conservation programs, and essentially all of the federal government's support for salmon recovery. They would cut the next generation of weather monitoring satellites, which is a huge deal, and the Space Weather Monitoring Program, which is also cut all education programs. They would reduce mission support and overhead for the agency by administration. So the fifth and final year of funding for the bipartisan infrastructure law, which for NOAA was over $600 million for facilities, habitat programs, coastal resilience projects, marine debris cleanup, support for university science programs, and other infrastructure programs. And they're trying to claw back money that was obligated to grantees and contractors under the Inflation Reduction Act. NOAA is not alone. There are lots of there have been a lot of attacks on government agencies, and those attacks hurt NOAA like they hurt other agencies. There have been a lot of those. Attacks on scientific integrity, ethics, and the civil service, the selling off of government facilities, which house important programs, the hiring freeze, the politicization of the civil service hiring process, Schedule F, general chaos and uncertainty, the contemptuous and unqualified leadership that has been installed in high places, and shredded relationships with grantees, contractors, long-term research partners, stakeholders, students, tribal nations, communities, and states. Next slide, please. One of my friends driving around inside the agency and crashing into each other, somewhat haphazardly, aggressively. It's not efficiency. Are we stuck, Madison? There we go. Feelings about this. This was a design communications staff who left, who got pushed out of NOAA. Next slide, please. Why are they attacking NOAA? NOAA has staff and provide services in every state and territory. It has long been popular on the Hill and in the states with both political parties. If you know about this agency, you usually like it. It's not usually a political football. I think there are a few reasons NOAA has been targeted so severely in this administration. The first is climate denial. Project 2025 accused NOAA of being a hotbed of climate alarmism. Let me remind you, NOAA has essentially no role in climate mitigation and emissions reductions, and it's not a regulator. NOAA's role in climate is information and resilience and adaptation. NOAA provides and reports about extreme weather, record-setting temperatures, billion-dollar disasters, and it maintains the climate arc trends. But if you don't want state-of-the-art peer-reviewed scientific information about the planet, then you don't want NOAA around. It's all too inconveniently true. Corruption and privatization. Some of these attacks are clearly self-interested. There are businesses and billionaires as large parts of NOAA, particularly the weather and data enterprises. We now consider NOAA's services to be public services, important to public safety, commerce, health, recreation, navigation, travel, and therefore free to the public. NOAA already has a host of public and private partnerships that are estimated to support billions of dollars in businesses. But in a spoils system, the parts of government that can be privatized and monetized are vulnerable. And if that happens, you, the consumer, will have to pay for them if you can and go without them if you can't. And finally, ignorance. They're going to break things without even knowing it. The people in charge at the moment do not understand government in general or NOAA in particular. Like most government agencies, NOAA's mission is complex and technical. It takes deep specialized expertise to perform many of these functions. And it takes a lot of specialized and expensive stuff: planes, ships, radars, sensors, supercomputers, satellites, models, data laboratories to support it. You guys having trouble hearing me? Next slide. Yeah.
Yeah, Renee, you're cutting out a bit, but we can hear you. So I think maybe having your camera off is helping.
Great, thank you. I'm very sorry about that. These are my final words. The parts of the agency are interdependent. Burning some branches of it to the ground, haphazardly, whimsically, greedily, stupidly, will make the agency less efficient and effective. And burning too many of them down will eventually bring the whole enterprise down. As we all know, it's a lot easier and faster to burn something down than it is to build it. Next slide, please. NOAA and federal government generally is important. It's hard, it's essential. It's not a reality TV show or a game show, and we shouldn't accept that it's being handled that way now. We are all less safe because of it. And I'm handing off to the fabulous Dr. Marshall Shepard. I hope that you can hear him better than you could me. Sorry about the technical difficulties.
Hey, Renee, sorry to jump in here. I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation, and to clarify before Marshall begins his presentation, thank you for sharing that perspective. I did want to just flag and reiterate your point up front that those views are those of your own personal views and not necessarily representative of the panel here today. So with that, I'm going to pass things off to Dr. Marshall Shepard, and thank you again so much, Dr. Shepard, for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me okay? I'll try to keep going with the video on for now. And I do want to just reiterate that disclaimer because I was hesitant to participate if there were any kind of policy or political related discussions. So I want to be clear that my remarks are just steeped in the science of weather and climate and the NOAA and National Weather Service mission. Anything that's said today does not reflect any perspective of my employer or anyone that I'm affiliated with, nor any of the discussions from previous or following subsequent speakers as well. So I'm Marshall Shepard, and I want to talk a bit about the weather and climate aspects of NOAA from a scientist perspective, particularly using the lens as a researcher, as a former president of the American Meteorological Society, and so forth. As you can see, next slide. I want to begin here because there's an often stated narrative that I hear in the public and policy space, which is, why do I need the National Weather Service when I have my app? Well, that's like asking, why do I need the potato farmer when I have French fries from a fast food restaurant? Uh, as you just heard, NOAA and the National Weather Service essentially is the backbone and the infrastructure for your weather forecast on your app, your television forecast, and so forth. And so many times people see the end product of the National Weather Service and NOAA, but are not necessarily seeing everything behind that end product in the same way that we don't see what's happening behind the production of French fries or potato chips. Next slide. So when I think about the so what for NOAA, particularly the National Weather Service, I think about the public good of the weather and climate enterprise. The federal enterprise is a part of a broader industry, academic ecosystem. And so the National Weather Service and NOAA are public goods. Next slide. So when you think about your fire, a house catching on fire, your own home, or perhaps your neighbors, you call 911 and the fire department comes. That's how I think about the role of the National Weather Service in some aspects of NOAA. They are providing a public good for every American, for everyone that's in this country. Um, Weather forecasts, warnings, risk communication. These are all inherent functions of the National Weather Service, and they always should be. Next slide. Oh, I think it's go back to I think there was several before that actually. Hey, keep going back. There you go. That, okay. Next slide. It should be that one. There you go. So just to illustrate this point, the worst weather disaster in American history was the Galveston hurricane of 1900. Uh, Thousands of people lost their lives from that hurricane because we didn't have a National Weather Service. We didn't have weather satellites. We didn't have robust observing systems. And so essentially, this community was caught off guard. It's comforting to know that we live in a situation where we would likely never have that situation occur because we do have geosynchronous weather satellites that were provided by NESDIS. We do have weather radar, and we do have weather forecast offices in the National Hurricane Center and forecast models that give us pretty good information on where hurricanes are going and are increasingly improving their capacity to tell us how strong they're going to be as well. Next slide. So to that point, we are in the midst of the 2025 hurricane season. There are the current names. The Atlantic hurricane season is quite calm right now. We do have the fifth named storm of the Eastern Pacific hurricane season happening as we speak and will likely make landfall in the coastal regions of southern Mexico around Acapulco and so forth. We do expect, based on NOAA projections, above average hurricane season. That's okay that it's quiet right now. The peak of the hurricane season typically comes in August, September, and October anyhow. So certainly given the 2024 season with storms like Hurricane Milton and Hurricane Helene, we want to be on guard for what's to come. Next slide. To kind of keep this theme of the public good, I want to shatter this myth, and hopefully none of you have said this, which is the weather forecasts are wrong, or they're always inaccurate, or they're not making any headway there. I often get this joke as a meteorologist, it must be nice to work in a field where you're wrong half the time. Well, that's a perception. I mean, generally those things are steeped in narratives where people don't understand things like percent chance of rain or the hurricane cone or the fact that even if there is a rainfall 10 miles from your home and it didn't rain at your home, that doesn't mean the forecast wasn't wrong. That's why we use probabilistic forecasting. So this is another example of how weather forecasts have improved over the years. What you see is from 1990 to 2024, this is from the National Hurricane Center official track era. And one of the things that I want to call your attention to, let's focus on, the yellow line, which represents a 72-hour forecast. So essentially 3 days. In 2024, the error was somewhere, let's say around 65 nautical miles. That 3-day forecast today in 2024, if you take this over, is better than a 1-day forecast was in 1990. So the error from a 3-day forecast today is better than the error from a 1-day forecast back in 1990. And so you can see that at all time frames, even out to 5 days, have made improvements over the years. Next slide. Here is the CEO of Black Swift Technologies with a NOAA hurricane scientist. I want to emphasize this is something that often gets lost in discussions, and that is the fact that there is a significant public-private partnership with NOAA and the National Weather Service. I'm a former NASA scientist. I was at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center in the DC area for many years, and I don't think that many people realize just how much of a partnership there is between industry and the National Weather Service and NOAA. There are industry contractors working right alongside National Weather Service and NOAA civil servants at almost every facility, and that's the case for NASA and other government agencies as well. Next slide. Just to give you an example, I talked about track forecast. Oh, I'm sorry, I go back. There, keep going. One more. Back. No, one more. One more. One more. One more. I don't know how far we got. Well, you're going, I think you're going the wrong way. Back. Keep going back. Back. There should be something that says hurricane intensity. One more. All right, there we go.
Apologies, Zoom was having difficulties.
No worries at all. We're not driving our own slides, so apologize to the audience for the little delays here. So this is just an example, not only that we're showing improvements in track forecasting, hurricane intensity forecast error does lag. We know less about the improvements in hurricane intensity than we do track forecasts, but a recent paper, the Societal or Social Value of Hurricane Forecast, produced by the National Bureau of Economic Research, showed that once the Hurricane Forecast Improvement Program was implemented, we started to see improvements not just in track, but in intensity forecast as well. Next slide. And I'll sort of pick up the pace a little bit. Just other examples. Back in 2018 or so, there was a tragic duck boat incident in Missouri. And this is an article that I wrote at the time in Forbes. And I was highlighting the fact that there were people saying that the storm came without warning. It's 2025. In 2018, it was the same. It's rare that a tornadic storm at this time comes without warning, though you might see that headline from time to time. There are likely outlooks in the days in advance. The National Weather Service will issue tornado watches, warnings, and so forth. To give you a more specific example, next slide, of the ability and capacity of the National Weather Service and NOAA, this was a story from March of this year. The Carter County Emergency Manager credits a 2-hour heads-up phone call from the National Weather Service, Paducah. There's now what's called a warn-on-forecast system modeling capacity within the National Weather Service now, where we have the ability, in theory, to give up to 2 hours lead time on a storm that will produce a tornado. Now, I'm not talking about 2 hours lead time on a severe storm itself, but on the actual tornado happening. That's due to research, development, and the professionalism of the National Weather Service staff. We have the ability to give up to 2 hours lead time warning. Next slide. NOAA is not just involved in sort of real-time weather forecasting. Some of the capacity related to their infrastructure is also important. I know many of you may be of an age that you remember when many of the airplane crashes that would happen were due to wind shear or to microbursts near the airports. That's essentially eradicated. We don't see that anymore because of the FAA and National Weather Service Doppler radar systems and terminal Doppler radar systems and other types of warning instrumentation. That's essentially a hazard that no longer exists for the aviation industry. Now, of course, there are still microbursts and wind shear accidents that occur, but the large scale crashes that we used to see in the 70s and so forth just don't exist. Next slide. NOAA has many centers. Our previous speaker spoke to that. I just want to highlight that when you hear about geomagnetic storms and disruptions to GPS systems and electrical systems and so forth, that's coming from NOAA's space weather monitoring capacity as well. So again, some of those behind the scene things that you may not be aware of that are happening at NOAA. So next slide, because I'm drawing to a close here. I think my time is up. You can go on past the radar. Radar is just another example. I want to kind of foray before I pass it on to Bernadette into compound disasters and risks. Next slide. We know that climate is changing. We know that it has an economic impact. This is the 2024 weather and climate disasters that cost at least $1 billion, and in many cases, well more than $1 billion. Next slide. And we know that these billion-dollar events are increasing. This is from 1980 to 2024. Some of that is due to the changes in weather and climate, but also to the fact that there's just more stuff in the way from an economic cost perspective. Next slide. So what we need to think about is the fact, and I told Congress this when I testified back in 2019, the extremes are becoming more extreme. And people, infrastructure, the economy, national security, they feel these extremes more than the averages. Next slide. And so I'm going to end with this. I was the co-author on this National Academy's report looking at compound disasters in the Gulf Coast region in 2020 and 2021. And so I want to leave you with the 5 R's. As we have moved into this new weather climate system and regime, we have to understand that risk will be compounded. It won't just be singular event. When there's a hurricane, there's often loss of power, loss of water. So we have to plan for and respond to these events in a compounded way. And that includes our ability to be resilient to these as well. Recovering from them will require more of an epic approach as opposed to an event approach. And as our colleagues at NASA, National Weather Service, and the NOAA know all too well, current weather events are different from past weather events. So extreme events that may provide benchmarks or context for people now no longer apply. So we need to make sure that we have a National Weather Service and a NOAA that's ready not only for this current generation of weather, but that weather to come as well. And with that note, I will pass it along to my colleague and friend Bernadette Woods-Plackey so that she can talk more about extreme events like Hurricane Helene that you were just seeing there. Thank you.
Thank you, Marshall. I'm not able to turn on my camera. So while you're doing that, I'm also going to share my screen and bring in my slides. Okay, now I can start my video. There we go. You need to see the stripes. And are we able to see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna take those. Yes, all right. I have to say, I'm gonna add on to what Renee and Marshall and others and John was saying too, that to even approach a presentation on the value of NOAA is so simple in one way because it is such a powerful, amazing agency, but then it's so humbling and overwhelming on another side because of the immense amount of value that it brings and the amazing people that make up NOAA. That's one of the biggest parts of it. So I'm humbled to even be included in this discussion of an expert around NOAA information, but I bring one perspective. And we know a lot of you on this webinar are NOAA employees, and I want to thank you for all that you do. It's really important. I work at Climate Central. For those who don't know, we're a nonprofit research and communication organization. We are also non-advocacy. We purely are focused on the science and how it applies to people's lives and helping them understand how our climate is changing, what that means, and what we can do about it. So you've seen this a few times already. I'm going to come back to it, but it's so important when trying to understand NOAA, right? Its mission. To understand and predict changes in climate, weather, ocean, and coasts. The second piece here, I also want to lean in on this a little bit, to share that knowledge and information with others. and to conserve and manage coastal and marine ecosystems. Now, that middle piece is good. We're going to talk a lot about data and information, and I will too, but you can have all the science in the world. If you don't have a way of packaging that and applying it so that people and communities can understand and can make decisions on it and can benefit from that, then you're missing a huge component of what science and research and data are. And one of the beauties of NOAA is it has that full range, and it really is important to have the full component to benefit societies, and it's such a big part of NOAA. So why does NOAA matter? Well, you've already heard a lot of reasons. I'll add a few more. Open access data. The data that NOAA provides is foundational not only for so many of the decisions you've heard in the United States and for our companies to thrive and for communities to thrive, it's also really valuable for the rest of the world. We offer our data, and there are a lot of countries that benefit from our open access data. It allows for reliable source of information so people can go to the source, and you can look at, you can dig in, you can do the methodologies, you can apply it. So it's not always just packaged for you, but you have that ability to look at it and understand the real facts behind the data. Also, increasing transparency, bringing that data and that information into our research, our models, our forecasts, and being able to check it with that open access data builds that trust in communities for the real goal and purpose of NOAA, which is keeping people safe and prepared. And this comes through in the full range of data and instrumentation. It's not just the collecting of data, but it's the constant upkeep of the instrumentation to get that data, whether it is a weather balloon going in the air, whether it is a plane that is going to fly into a hurricane, whether it is a satellite, whether it's a ship going out to collect data. That all feeds into our research, our models, and our forecasts. So we can understand why things are happening, and we can understand how to prepare for them, again, with that ultimate goal of keeping people safe and prepared. And then that comes back to that point of the community engagement and the preparedness. And Renee made the point that it is part of the emergency management chain. And most people outside of NOAA don't fully comprehend that, how to the core the full meteorology world really is, but NOAA is in trying to live that mission. So let's look at this data and what we know from the data. It's not just data at the moment too, it's data sets over time. And that's one of the huge assets of NOAA is the quality of data and the long-term data sets. And when you interrupt long-term data sets, you lose a lot. This is how we know that our world is warming. And then we can get to how we know from our air observations too. It's a NOAA center on Mauna Loa in Hawaii that collects the atmospheric data to measure carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And this is just a snapshot from today on the left. Over this past month, the levels that our carbon dioxide is at in the atmosphere, highest ever in human recorded history. And you can see that steady rise on the right. And that's a direct correlation with the temperature we're seeing. So when you get these multiple sources of data, and again, package it in research and models and forecasts, you can prepare for the future. We can apply that on local levels for real life decision making. We know in Phoenix, with these temperatures on the rise, we're getting more days above 110 degrees. That's one of those markers when you have to operate life differently. You may shift times of when you're working, or when kids are playing outside, or when there's a sports camp, or when you have to open the cooling centers and activate them. Also, the humid heat component we're seeing mainly across Baton Rouge in this incident, but also across a lot of our country. Also, calculating the records of hot to cold and how over time we're just seeing so much more heat and so much less cold. This plays into our decision making. And then again, when you bring all that together, put it into models and look at in time, and you can see this is what we need to prepare for. A summer in Grand Rapids by the end of the decade, by the end of the century, is going to feel like a summer in Memphis temperature-wise. So that factors into how you build infrastructure, roads. Do you add air conditioning or not add air conditioning to a building, a school, a home? And Also, how we plant food, what crops we plant, when we plant them, all of that factors into as we see our climate shifting and the one that we need to prepare for. This plays out in our rainfall. This factors into so many decisions also, how we build our roads, our sewage systems. They're already being overwhelmed as our climate has changed and we're getting more of this heavy rain, but how do we prepare that for the future? And this is all NOAA data that we're showing you in these slides here. This plays out locally too, from St. Louis to Houston, and we've seen heavy rainfall event after heavy rainfall really take a toll on people's lives and livelihoods. Change in fire weather days. This is another huge risk we're seeing, and this is all because of our NOAA data, that we can package this together in hot, dry, windy days so that we can prepare communities for fire risk that continues to rise. How we plant, what we plant, where we plant. We're seeing less chill. And that might sound good to some people in colder communities, but the thing is, crops, for example, fruit trees, are based on a certain amount of chill. And when you lose that, your Michigan cherries don't have the same punch to them and the same taste. Des Moines, huge agricultural state and city and town. And we're seeing already a shift in our planting zone. So what crops we plant, when we plant them, and this is where we're going. So it's all this data and information and research and science that allows us to do this. This plays out in our health. This is a big part of our health. So people don't always think of NOAA and health, but it's a huge thing, even outside of the extreme heat and extreme weather events that we're seeing. But more mosquitoes and bugs are spreading poleward. We're seeing our allergy seasons getting longer and stronger. We know all of this because of NOAA data. This is taking a toll on our cooling demand, so it's costing us money. People are very concerned about kitchen table issues and pocketbook issues, and this plays out, and we see this because of this data and science and research. And then you also see that playing out in our power outages. In some cases it's a nuisance, in some cases it could be life-threatening. If you take a really hot community such as Phoenix, for example, or Las Vegas, and you lose power, you lose that ability to bring that temperature down to a livable level in some places. And Marshall touched on this, but I'm going to hit it again because this is an important data set that already got stopped. It stopped. So we have the data through 2024 right now, but we're not accumulating it and processing it for 2025. But the $1 billion disasters, think about that. That's even with the adjustment in costs, that's a lot of money. So that's a real high bar for a $1 billion disaster. And we're seeing more and more of these. And this plays into what Marshall was saying with compounding. And think about that on the community level, how you prepare, how you recover. The resilience is just getting really stressed, but it's also this time to prepare in between them. This used to be on the average of every 80 plus days. Now it's less than 2 weeks that we're getting a $1 billion disaster. So it's not just our atmosphere, but NOAA, some of the biggest components of NOAA are ocean. And sometimes when we live on land, we forget we are an ocean planet. So here's another data source that collects a lot of really important information. And it's a global network, the Argo Float Network. And I highlighted 2 things on the bottom there, 2 numbers. The network itself is just over 4,000 operational floats that can get surface data, it can get depth, it can also get many different factors of oxygen and different elements that are in the water. But look at how many of those floats are from the United States. It's more than half. So it's a big component of how the world is understood. And as you've heard many times, our weather, our climate, it just does not stop at borders. It's all connected. And we know that that's where most of the heat is getting stored right now, is in our oceans. And that's playing out in some pretty dramatic ways. Now, this is by, unfortunately, someone who, and he's on here now, Zach Labe, who also lost his job with the NOAA layoffs and firings. But we at Climate Central are fortunate enough to get Zach now. But he spends a lot of time looking at what this means in the Arctic and with those warming waters. We're losing a lot of ice. And that's a critical part of our climate system. And we can also use this data and package it in different ways to better understand how the world is operating around us and how we can prepare for it. And attribution science is one of those areas of climate science where we can now quantify the role of climate change within individual weather events, or in this case, with ocean temperatures. And so you can go to our website if you want to look at this, but this again is NOAA data. And just looking at the role of climate change in our warming waters. And that plays out with so many things in our water outside of even our storms that we've talked about, but our fish, where those fish live, which fish live, what's happening with our corals, and the whole health of the ecosystem of our oceans. So I come back to this picture a lot, and I thought it was relevant for this discussion today, because this is really what gives us life on Earth, is this atmosphere of ours. And there's so much that we've already done to help understand it, but there's so much more still to understand. And so that is why NOAA is so important. And I'm just going to leave you with this one here. June 24th, Show Your Stripes Day. Got my stripes on. You can go to any of those links on the bottom. This is this is different from NOAA, I know, but we use NOAA data. In this is a way to really start those climate conversations. Show your stripes and social media, have conversations, wear your colors if you have them, but that's coming up this Saturday. So I will stop sharing now and hand it back.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Fern, for that excellent presentation. I know we have a lot of comments in the chat, and I'm going to get to those in a minute, but I did want to just start with one of my own. I think it's not controversial to say that the climate has shifted such that there's a new onus to be justifying why this kinds of work is important for the government to be taking on, spending money on. And fundamentally, Bern, I think you did an excellent job of laying out that this work is important because, among other reasons, it helps Americans, businesses, fishermen, everyone make informed decisions about risk. But a key part of fulfilling that mission to share knowledge and information with the public involves scientists going out and communicating with people outside of our sort of scientific circles, which is work that doesn't come naturally to most of us. We have two anomalies on the panel here, outstanding scientific communicators. But let me ask you both, and I welcome Renee's input here too, as a non-scientist who has had to deal with science communication. But my question is sort of beyond this webinar and this audience, how else are you getting the word out here? Who are you talking to? And where are you finding opportunities to connect with folks that might not interact with the field of meteorology and climate science beyond checking the weather app on their phone in the morning?
You want to go start, Bernadette?
You can go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I can jump into that. So I'm going to drop something into the chat right now that kind of lays out my answer to that question, but you'll have to read it. It's a piece I wrote for the National Academy of Engineering last year called "The Case for the Science Popularizer." And I titled it that because I work in the world of the academic enterprise, the ivory tower, and it's often seen as lessening or cheapening your science or your reputation if you are speaking more broadly to the public or to the media or to social media tweets and so forth, all of which I do. I shared some social media locations earlier. We have to engage more broadly as scholars, whether in the ivory tower or in government agencies. And I know from my time in the government, sometimes that can be a challenge. There are gates that are kept and so forth. But if we aren't there to convey or communicate the science, we're leaving openings for those with misinformation and agendas to fill the gaps that we leave behind. So I used to tweet. I'm now on Blue Sky. I engage in social media. I will take media interviews from various large national media. I write for Forbes. I host the Weather Channel's podcast. I do TED Talks. Everyone doesn't have the same skill set. And so you might say, well, I'm not as comfortable as you giving a TED Talk, Dr. Shepard, or hosting a show on the Weather Channel, but find your lane and use it. Use it with fact-based information. Use it in ways that you can convey. There's also an article I wrote back in 2016 in Forbes called 9 Tips for Communicating Science to People Who Aren't Science. because I think John's right. We don't train scientists in graduate school to be communicators or to write op-eds or to host shows or have media training. We train them to write theses and dissertations and go to present those at conferences. So we have to fundamentally change how we're training future scientists. It's what I call end-to-end science. We need that mechanism. So I'll defer to Bernadette here because, again, Bernadette's humble. She's one of the best weather communicators I've seen and climate communicators, and that's why she's doing her thing at Climate Central. So
That is very kind, especially coming from you, who's so great. There's a few ways to take this, John. One is that people really want to learn. If you have conversations with people and they have a question, I mean, think about how many people talk about weather. Or if I say what I do, people are like, is the climate really changing? People genuinely want to learn. And all of the social science shows us that people understand things are changing or understand things, but there's still a gap sometimes in their knowledge of what that means, what they can do from weather and climate and so on. So if not us, who? Who's going to help them understand? We're the people that know this stuff and are genuinely excited about this stuff. So that's one piece of this. I'll talk about what Climate Central does, and then I'll talk about some general tips that everyone can bring forward. So Climate Central, we are science and communication. The program I direct, Climate Matters, was started with TV meteorologists, expanded out to journalists. We have a strong focus on local news because that's where so many people experience what's going on in our changing climate and changing weather. Not that we don't work with national too, but the point is people who want to tell these stories sometimes get stuck on the science. The journalists, even some of the TV meteorologists who understand the science so well may have questions about something new that's coming out or how to apply that to their work. And so we act as a science translator by doing education. We do content creation with a weekly package of reporting resources. That's where a lot of my graphics came from. Anyone can sign up on our website for those under Climate Matters, and you can get these free resources to help with your social media or presentations or just learning. And then the third is support. And so we support the media in telling these stories, whether it's connecting them with a specific researcher. We work in Spanish language media, so sometimes finding a Spanish speaker and an expert in a specific area. But it's really connecting with the media to help get this information out. The other aspect of Climate Central that's pretty robust is our sea level program. And that works with a lot of community decision makers and local leaders along the coasts who, again, know they need to prepare for something, but sometimes don't always know what and how. And so it's packaging science and information in ways that people can process and understand and consume that information and make decisions around it. So those are a couple of examples. I mean, there's a lot of other projects we're brought into since sadly climate change is affecting so many aspects of our lives. So we're brought in to help people understand the basics and how to apply that knowledge to their field, whether it is real estate, security, whether, I mean, we're seeing this with migration right now and cultural issues from sports and how we have activities and how we prepare for those. And so it's really affecting everything. Then the tips I'd give to everyone that anyone can apply into their work is the golden rule of communication is know your audience. And so many people forget that. And you really have to process what that means. Topic, timing, tone, whether you're talking to someone who's academic or you're talking to your grandmother. It's how you approach what you're going to talk about. So that's the first tip. The second tip is meeting people where they are. Connect on those shared values. There's so much divisiveness right now for a lot of reasons that are obvious, but there is a lot that connects with us together. And I bring up this example a lot, but I mean, I'm a Penn State grad. I go to my Penn State football games. People have different views on a lot of things than I do at my tailgates, but that is a uniting factor that brings us together. There's a lot of climate connected with that. I also used an example for our tailgate. Someone showed up with a truck and I said, oh, have you seen the new Ford 150 Lightning? Could be great. It could power our tailgate. So there's a lot of ways you can bring these pieces together. The third is simplify. It's great to get geeky with geeky people. And we love being with our geeky people. Absolutely love it. And there's places for that, whether it's the academic halls or our organizations or agencies, or AMS is a huge component of this that we all love. But not everyone cares that much. So we need to simplify it for them. And that's where some people can work a little harder and do this. And there was something that was told to me when I was starting TV. Talk like you're talking to your grandmother. Now, I don't have a PhD grandmother, someone may, but you want them to understand. You care about them. And whether you're talking to them in person and you see sort of a glazed over factor, you lost them. You need to come back to them. So that's an in-person communication. Other than that, though, use words that people use regularly. If you're going to use a complex word, explain it. And you can do that in writing, you can do that verbally, but if you start using too many of those together, total glaze over look, you lost them, they're on to the next thing. So simplify and personalize. Tell a story in that. So the fourth thing is personalizing and telling a story if you have an opportunity to tell a story, because as you bring people on a journey. And then I'd say the fifth thing is don't be afraid to engage in communication around this, weather, climate, all of it, because you have science on your side, you have public opinion on your side. Genuinely, people want to know more information. And when it comes to climate change, overwhelmingly, the biggest area of misinformation that we see is that we think our neighbors and our friends don't care. So you have over 70% of society that knows the climate is changing, but only 30%, 20 to 30% hear people or engage in conversations about it regularly. If we don't even talk about it because we're afraid people don't want to, then we're never going to help people be prepared and understand how to make smarter decisions. So those are the 5 suggestions I have. Know your audience, meet people where they are, simplify, personalize, or tell a story. Again, if you're in a situation that can, and then don't be afraid, engage in these conversations.
Well, I was certainly taking notes during that. So thank you so much for sharing that, Bernadette. I did want to lift up something you said about Climate Central. You guys do provide just fantastic images and graphs and all sorts of figures that illustrate this stuff clearly. And I saw a few of those in your presentation. So would encourage folks to look at Climate Central for resources if they're looking for some. Renee, did you have thoughts about outreach, science communication?
Nothing that could top Dr. Shepard and Bernadette. You've got 2 and climate communicators on the program. I would just say something someone told me very early in my career about climate is that we don't have a science problem. We have a political and a communications problem. So these are all the right questions to focus on. If we eliminate NOAA, we might have a science problem, but we know what we need to do about these issues. It's just a question of having the will to do them.
Wonderful. Thank you. So switching gears a little bit to more of the sort of technical nitty-gritty stuff, there was a question in the chat about the possible impact of losing sail drones on the ocean surface for monitoring hurricanes, particularly in the context of this hurricane season. And more generally, sort of, are those systems dependent on to forecast and monitor hurricanes, and what other systems are sort of used for that forecasting purpose?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. I'm sure the other panelists might want to weigh in, but remember I mentioned that we're better at hurricane track forecasting than we are at intensity forecasting. The intensity forecasts are improving, and I showed that, but they still lag the track forecast. Well, why is that? Well, our weather forecast models do a pretty good job of getting those large scale conditions correct, the jet streams and positions of large high pressure sitting over the ocean. And so that really is the governing forces behind where the hurricane's going. Right now, we have Hurricane Eric out in the Eastern Pacific. It's undergoing rapid intensification as we speak. The intensification processes are things that are happening. You have to kind of pop the hood. If you think of a hurricane as a heat engine or a car, you got to pop the hood and see what's going on in those big thunderstorms in the eye wall. Those processes, the ocean heat content beneath the storm, these are the things that govern intensity forecast. And those are the things that we have less information on to feed into the models. That's why we fly hurricanes into the storm. I'm sorry, planes into the hurricane, right? Drops on so we can get information. We need information inside the storm or beneath the storm. So that's a long-winded way of getting back to the sail drone question. Sail drones, other what we call in situ, meaning taking observations in the moment, information, provide those sort of smaller scale details that help us understand things like intensification, rapid intensification, eye wall replacement cycles that may be happening. So any loss or degradation of that type of information is a threat to our ability to continue to improve intensity forecasts. I'll make a bigger picture statement too. You may not realize this, but those weather balloons that are launched twice a day, those are providing a lot of information on the atmosphere that goes into the forecast models. And so if we lose too much of that information and also lose a lot of our satellite information that is being sort of fed into the models, then that can start to degrade those larger scale patterns that I said we do so well with right now. So I'll stop there.
Renee. I'll add one more piece too, in not just the forecasting aspect, but bringing it to the emergency management chain of when to evacuate, how to evacuate. Rapid intensification is so critical for several reasons. If a hurricane is just off your coast and it's a category 1 or category 2 maybe, there's only so much evacuation you're going to do. If it's a 4 or 5, that's a very different situation. And if that happens in a day, you can't just spin up a massive evacuation for a big city in that amount of time. So that's why we need this intensity forecast. On top of that, what the sail drones have been doing is they actually have cameras with them too. And for those who haven't seen it, many of you I'm sure have, but really dramatic cameras. That helps people understand the seriousness of the situation when you see something like that. It helps those who may have been on the fringe of evacuating to evacuate when you see something so dramatic that could be so damaging. So that's another element that was helping to advance the forecasting and the emergency management aspect of it. I don't know the latest. I did see an article. I think it was Andrew Freeman. I'm not exactly sure that maybe the agreement wasn't signed for sail drones in time for this season, but I'm not exactly sure on that. But I know that's why it's popping up right now.
Let me make one more connection and ask the follow-up question. I think I saw research a little while ago that was suggesting that climate change could have a role in rapid intensifications of hurricanes through the increase in sea surface temperature. Is that something that, Bern, you're looking into? Marshall shaking his head.
100%. There's a direct correlation with the heat in the ocean to driving that wind speed. And the more heat we have, the faster and the higher, I mean, there you can get geeky to some limits to the winds, but more heat means more energy. And if there's a storm going over a pocket of really hot water, that's where you see the explosion. That's where things change. And so that's why we need data.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, some of the big rapid we've seen a lot of it in the last few years. Just go back to 2020 up to last year, a lot of rapid intensification. That maybe the paper that you saw might be the same one that I have seen recently that's showed that there's a correlation between marine heat waves, which is this really hot water in the oceans, and rapid intensification. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it goes to the point to need to continue monitoring and making observations for sure. There's one other question about localized NOAA and National Weather Service offices. There's a rumor that some of these are closing and tornado warnings are not being sent. And the asker wants to know, is this true? And what's happening on the ground at the Weather Service, to the extent that the panelists can talk about that.
Yeah, I'll give my thoughts on it because yes, there are offices in places that get a lot of tornadoes and severe weather that have had some sort of declines in staffing and have been short-staffed and have reduced balloon launches and are in some cases closing their I guess not 24/7 anymore. That's a big concern. There's no other way I can say that. Having said that, I did see some narratives out there that were a little bit misleading. I don't, for example, the Kentucky, the London, Kentucky, I believe it was tornadoes and so forth. There's not evidence that there were any missed warnings because that office was short-staffed. But it also means that many of these people are working overtime and going well above and beyond. There's a really good article that I saw, I can't remember it, where it was, but you're not seeing degradation because of these cuts, not because they're not critical cuts. It's just because people are working over and beyond hours and they're getting fatigued and they're starting to have morale issues and so forth. So this speaks to the professionalism of the National Weather Service and NOAA staff. They're covering the gap so that what you're seeing is not degradation, but we know that's not sustainable.
Yeah, I would just like to emphasize that the Weather Service in particular, but really a lot of NOAA, there is a little bit of a emergency manager mentality, a hero mentality, a crisis manager mentality. There are several offices, as Dr. Shepard said, that no longer provide 24-hour coverage. And if there's a tornado flaring up, oh, maybe late afternoon in the South when, weather is starting to get turbulent, the forecasters are going to stay on duty. They're going to work all night. They typically do that during major, hurricanes and things now. And you can imagine, pulling all-nighters for a couple of hurricanes a year, but dangerous weather happens all the time, and the Weather Service is going to, I worry a lot about the mental and physical health impacts of staff, and on it's not sustainable, as Dr. Marshall said.
I'll add one more to that. It also doesn't give you the opportunity, if a kid gets sick, or if you get sick, or if something happens, there's no one to absorb that. And then there's maintenance around things. So that's even during an event, right? So there's equipment maintenance leading up to an event. And if you can't keep up the radars, or if something breaks on them and you don't have someone out there to even see it broke, then you're going to lose information in your warning system. Also, when there's an event going on, an extreme event, a tornado outbreak, a hurricane, a snowstorm, in one of these offices, everything's extra, right? Your hours are extra. The number of people operating is like, there's someone running the radar, there's someone sending out the warnings, there's someone managing the communication with the other emergency management chain members, there's someone responding to the media to help get that. There's a whole bridge of people that you connect with. So when there's an event, it requires more people doing more. And there's zero capacity for someone to get sick, or if someone gets, or any of that. So it ups the risk for mistakes. And these people are amazing people going above and beyond. But there's stories coming out of that their bathrooms weren't even working during one of these tornado outbreaks. So like I've not heard of anyone missing anything, but I just have to put an exclamation point on what Marshall and Renee said. This is the expertise. This is the mission-driven nature of these amazing employees.
100%. And, we've been talking a lot during this webinar, I think rightfully so, about applied research, but there's a question in the chat about the precursor to applied research, which is basic research, right? So what kind of work is NOAA doing there, partnering with either university or external scientists, and how does that kind of inform the application of these things?
Well, NOAA is an applied agency. I mean, everything that NOAA does is applied. So to give you a sort of counter that, I worked at NASA for many years, which we were developing technologies like spaceborne radar and things that might find their way on the applied side of the house at some point. So for example, the GOES weather, someone asked about the GOES weather satellite program. I put a link in there. NASA would help develop some of the initial technology before handing it over to NOAA for sort of use and application. So everything that NOAA does to me is very applied. And now it does have an Office of Atmospheric and Oceanic Research, OAR, that sort of doing advanced research, but the end game for that is application. Unlike some agencies, NSF and others, that have more of a theoretical research lens. So I would just start there. But having said that, yes, NOAA, in partnership with academic researchers, with private industry, are exploring things like social and behavioral sciences aspects of forecast. A good forecast is a terrible forecast if someone didn't get it or if they didn't understand it. And so we've got great radars and satellites and models, but if someone still claims that it came without warning, or they didn't understand the cone, or they didn't understand what 30% chance of rain meant, is it a good forecast? So NOAA's investing with its partners in the academy and so forth to understand the social, behavioral, communication, psychological aspects of these storms as well. NOAA has started to do things, and I showed an example of that, putting economic numbers on its forecast. What's the value of improved hurricane intensity forecast? It's great that we're improving them, but how does that, I mean, that even when I showed you that track forecast and how we've improved that over the last several decades, that translates to dollars. That translates to lives saved, because when you can narrow the range of the Florida coast that you're having to evacuate, that translates into, savings for various industries and businesses and restaurants and hotels and so forth, to the point about someone that put that in the hotel. So I think I want people to leave here understanding that, impacts on NOAA and its sort of operating budgets are impacts on the broader private sector as well, because of the private public partnership that I mentioned, but then the cascading impacts.
Great. Yeah. And kind of a reminder that sometimes the line between applied and basic research can be blurry too. There's a follow-up question to that, Dr. Shepard, in the chat just now. If you could share links to that info about the economic value of weather forecasts. And yeah, I also found that fascinating, and I think a good approach to emphasizing the value add of NOAA.
Sure. Yeah, I'm dropping something in there right now.
Well, I just see one huge question in the chat, which is, why are folks not accepting climate change? And we have 8 minutes if we want to dig into that. Yeah, I don't know, Vern, I thought you did a great job of sort of laying out some of the misconceptions about climate change and why they might be in the public ecosystem, and how we can combat them by your 5 steps of meeting people where they are, presenting things simply, not getting too geeky, etc. But I don't know if you had sort of broader, bigger picture things to say about that. Maybe you do.
I have lots to say about that, but we're running out of time, so I'll keep it short. I'm putting a link in here, Global Warming 6 Americas. This is part of what I mean by mis and disinformation. The vast majority of Americans think the climate is changing. There has been a funded misinformation campaign with billions of dollars behind it to insert doubt. And when you look at the Global Warming 6 Americas, it's broken down to 6 categories of where Americans are on this topic. You'll see on the left that there are the alarmed, the concerned, and we can even bring in the cautious. But the alarmed and concerned are deeply convinced that the climate is changing. Sometimes they just don't know what that means to them, what they can do about it, what the solutions are, the difference between the value of different solutions. So they're not convinced that the climate's not changing. When you get to cautious, it's just a little tailored back from that, but they're still generally on that side. Disengaged and doubtful, it's just not a concern. You're like, really? But they'll have a conversation with you about it. It's just not a concern of theirs. And you see, it's a very small percent of the population. That's 5 and 12, so 17%. The dismissive is the group that will never come around, but it is tightly aligned with politics, with conspiracy theories, with a lot of cultural issues that go deep. And that group has an outsized voice on social media, in our politics. It is well funded. They've created bots on social media. So sometimes even some of the things you're seeing aren't even coming from a human being. And so it is very funded, it is very organized, but it is a really small percent of our population. So when you've got 90% who's willing to have this conversation, that's how you want to tailor your conversations and your approach. If you overweight that 10%, you're giving them too much power.
That's a great reminder, and something that I think we could all do well to internalize, that sort of the majority of people are at least willing to have a conversation.
I'll drop one final quote from Upton Sinclair that many of us have read. It's difficult to get a person to understand something when their salary depends on them not understanding it. If you think about that quote and think about sort of the history of sort of some of the things that we've seen on that side of the ledger, and also the Merchants of Doubt book and movie, you'll sort of contextualize that quote.
Dr. Shepard, there is one more question coming in for you about insurance. The article on Florida insurance is fascinating. Where do you think that problem is going in the future? Are people going to be uninsured or just move out of Florida? Will the government at any level be stepping in, do you think?
Yeah, so I shared an article somewhere up in the chat about insurance companies, some of them deciding to pull out of the states. I don't know that I can answer that question. It's certainly something to keep an eye on. It's sort of beyond my scope of expertise, but it's important to be aware that whether there's denial or belief in climate, or even if you call it climate, I mean, there are audiences that I talk about these things and I never mention the words climate change, and people are uncomfortable with it, although they know that something's happening. So the point I would sort of leave you with there is no matter whether you're talking to a Fortune 500 company, an insurance company, the military, they may not call it the words climate change, but they know something's happening.
I would just add that in the last insurance industry and the reinsurance industry have been very interested in working with NOAA, very interested in the data. They understand that there are very serious implications for their whole business model in sort of in the coming years because of climate change. So it's definitely something people should keep an eye on.
Yeah, in some sense, it kind of seems like insurance, the industry is on the front lines here and well aware of the science and doing some of the cutting edge research themselves in this field.
Now, could I say one last thing? Because I know this is environmental law institute. I think there's an important role for the legal community to play in thinking about weather and climate. I mean, we had a faculty member here in the law school that was sort of focused in these areas, but I don't see as much of it as I'd like to. So I kind of putting in a plug for sort of more synergy and connection across the weather, climate, and sort of legal space, because I think there's some really interesting sort of intersections and convergence that could sort of use expertise from both sides of the house.
I'll add to that real quick. Where it is showing up, and it's a little different than full-on NOAA discussion here, but it's in attribution science. And attribution science, as I briefly reference, how we can quantify the role of climate change within the weather events, or we can now get to the point of seasonal attribution analyses, individual temperature. I showed the ocean temperature one. Climate Central has a lot of research on this. They're working with a whole host of different partners in the attribution science community. We're weather attribution. NOAA was doing some. It's a little questionable where that's going right now. Copernicus in Europe is. So there is some really fascinating science coming out around this. And I know ELI is doing some work on this, and doing some, also Columbia is doing some work on this. Georgetown's doing some work on this. So they're starting to make some molds, but we might want to think of it more broadly, to Marshall's point, of some connections even outside of attribution science, of how to build that baseline knowledge to even ask the right questions that can get to the right answers.
I swear I didn't put them up to saying that. I love that you both chose to close with applications to the law and policy, because as you both know, that's near and dear to our heart at ELI and what we work on. We're just at time here. I want to thank everyone online for joining, and thank you, Dr. Shepard, Byrne, and Renee, so much for sharing your wisdom and expertise with us. I think we've all learned so much and are so grateful for your time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Massive thank you to each of our three speakers for your insightful presentations, as well as to John for your wonderful moderation. We so appreciate each of you taking the time to join us and offer your perspectives today. I just want to add a quick note for anyone who missed the disclaimers earlier. Each speaker shared their own views throughout the webinar, and their remarks did not represent the viewpoints of ELI or the group as a whole. A couple of other quick notes in closing as well. This webinar was recorded. The recording will be posted on the event webpage within a few business days. As I said at the beginning, this is part of a bigger ELI series examining various U.S. federal agencies, their structures, and the services they provide. Registration is not yet open for our future installments, but we encourage you to keep an eye on the series webpage so that you can attend future sessions. We'll put that in the chat. For more information about the Environmental Law Institute, ELI membership, and all of ELI's other upcoming programming, we encourage you to check out eli.org. And just a huge thank you so much, everyone. This concludes today's webinar, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.